Ink-a-dink, 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 ink-a-dink. Wow.
Oh. Hello, this is Basil BuddhaCat Presents. Oh. No, Mr. Santorum, we can have you on for another show coming up soon. We see that you're going to be in the race for a while longer, at least past Super Tuesday. But we'll schedule you back on. But I have to ask you now, because we've got our resident historian on the show tonight, the resident historian from Progressive Soup, Mark Albertson. We've been talking about, he must know you. He hung up.
Really?
Wow. Oh, Basil. Oh. Welcome to Basil BuddhaCat Presents. My name is David Stevenson. I'm Basil's co-host and interpreter. Of course, in center slot, we have Basil BuddhaCat. And Progressive Soup has graciously lent us its resident historian, Mark Albertson, to talk about, probably, since Basil's been focusing mostly on the Republican primary and the candidates, we may spend a little time on that, but now we've got the Basil phone ready to go, so in case we get some callers in, we can proceed with that. First of all, Basil BuddhaCat, center slot. Mark Albertson, resident historian from Progressive Soup. Mark, Basil watched the shows on Progressive Soup, and he's got some questions for you. Now, I'm going to have to translate for him, of course. As you know, Basil doesn't speak English, and as he's mentioned to the audience many times now, that's the fault of the audience. Basil shouldn't need to learn to speak English because Basil has developed his own version of Cantonese, not Mandarin, the official Communist Party language, but the more countrified version that the Chinese people speak, Cantonese. But Basil's got his own special version that he calls Catanese, and I've, by default, had to learn how to speak Catanese. But at any rate, so Basil's curious to note, and I want to make sure I get this accurate. Okay, yep. Basil wants to know, how did the Germans treat their cats? Because he knows we talked about Nazi Germany.
Right.
How did the Germans treat their cats in any special way, good or bad?
Well, I would hazard, I guess, the Germans, the Nazis didn't treat their cats bad at all. I don't think they considered them a political threat. Genghis Khan was a different story.
Okay. Now, Basil's cautioning us there because he says they might have been next after the Jews.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, Basil, you'll have to accept that for an answer. Okay. Now, Basil also, he's written me a list of questions to ask. He wants to know about mostly about Sarah Palin, because Basil, being close to the ground, Basil got a cat's eye view of Sarah. He liked the wink. He didn't like the hunting of wolves from planes. He didn't like the fact that apparently former Governor Palin made careful note of the fact that she was sending wolves, which she hunted and caught and shot from airplanes. She was sending them down to Texas and having them strung up along Governor Perry's route where he walks his dog. So if he doesn't catch any, if there's no coyotes out on that particular day, Governor Perry can take some target practice on some wolves hanging from ropes around the street. Basil wants to know, and I want to make sure I get this right because it's a tough language to translate. Basil wants to know, who's crazier, in your opinion? Rick Perry, Sarah Palin, Rick Santorum, Ron Paul, Newt Gingrich, Mitt Romney, Herman Cain. Now, we know I'm not going to include John Huntsman because Basil's had some good things to say about John Huntsman. John Basil describes John Huntsman as being a pretty reasonable guy, and that's probably why he carried no weight in the primaries. But Basil wants to know if you would give any of those in a clown car, who would be the biggest clown of all those candidates?
Biggest clown of all those candidates. So I don't think any of them are crazy. They're crazy as foxes. They're clever. Mm-hmm. They've gotten pretty far. I'm not just talking as a presidential campaign. I'm talking about people of note. Mm-hmm. They've seemed to have gotten pretty far. Whether they make it any farther in politics or not is irrelevant. They've gotten pretty far in our society. In a clown car.
In a clown car.
I don't know. You better make it a bus.
You can't see because you're a little bit off to the side now. But occasionally Basil will twitch his whiskers, and as well noted on the show up to this point, he likes to twitch his whiskers when something amuses him, or he'll flick his ear. So he's okay. Yep, he's got another question. Basil asks a question to me. He wants to know if the phone's turned on. Yep, the phone's turned on, Basil, so we will be getting callers in. We've had some good callers in on the show so far. We've had Phil from Iowa. We've also had Jerry from South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And Jerry he and Basil didn't exactly see eye to eye on much of anything. So Basil was pretty rough on Jerry. But now Jerry's wife, Basil invited not Jerry, but Jerry's wife to Facebook friend Basil so he could carry on a conversation with her. And it hasn't happened yet, and Basil's still reaching out to you, Jerry's wife. So he's giving you the benefit of the doubt that maybe Jerry's hogging the computer. So, but at any rate, so Basil now wants to know. He has another question for Mark Albertson. He wants to know. He wants you to talk further about Ron Paul. Ron Paul as a libertarian. Ron Paul as compare and contrast libertarians and liberals and progressives. Where do they overlap, if at all? Where can they find common ground?
Well, libertarians are very much, almost like do what you want. They don't like a lot of government interference. Mm-hmm. They like their freedom. They like the respect for their rights. This type of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas progressives more or less share some of these same ideas. Mm-hmm. They might elaborate for more government programs to do certain things, as opposed to libertarians who would not. The less government, the least. That type of thing. But they can still reach common ground with regards to what's going on with Wall Street, income inequality. The bank bailouts, which neither side likes. So there can be common ground there. As we talked about before, perhaps a popular front type movement, which would feature both progressives and libertarians or conservatives who do not like the agenda that's ongoing in Washington at this point. But that kind of idea smacks of a leftist or communist type of organization, which was popular in the 1960s and so on and so forth. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Popular Front movement in Vietnam, so on and so forth. But I don't think the terminology should make any difference. If you find common ground with a group and you share a certain agenda, well then just drop your differences and attack the common enemy or take on the common enemy. I mean that was the effect of the Allies in World War II. Mm-hmm. Britain and the United States seemed to have no problem siding with the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany. You don't have to be friends. I mean, allies don't have to be friends. They share a common agenda, at least for the moment.
Now Basil kind of does that. Basil has found some common ground in the animal kingdom. I mean, he's got the audio guy, who I've never seen, by the way. Basil identifies as being Tweety. Basil has behind the camera, although the camera doesn't move and it's only one camera, but Basil has snark hound. And I'm not sure exactly what a snark hound is, but that's how Basil identifies his cameraman. So Basil's been finding common ground with other members of the animal kingdom. So he says, yeah, okay, I want to make sure, yeah. He says he understands completely what you're getting at there. He thinks it's you can form temporary bonds with others in order to accomplish goals, in order to get things done. Okay, so what else, Basil? Whoa, hold on. Okay. Thank you for calling Progressive Soup. Okay. It's Rick Santorum.
Oh.
Okay, this former Senator Rick Santorum, who is one of the two premier, at this point, candidates in the Republican primaries. He's done very well. He's won as many primaries and caucuses as Mitt Romney. And his numbers are certainly up there with Mitt Romney. And do you have a question or do you want to make a comment? Basil, he's saying, former Senator Santorum is saying that he would never, ever, ever shoot a wolf from a helicopter. Okay. Well, that's interesting to note because you seem to have a lot of common ground with former Governor Sarah Palin on a lot of issues. But, okay, he says one man's sport is another man's non-sport, or another gal's non-sport. Okay. Thanks for calling. Hold on. Basil's got something else he wants to add. Basil says he wants to concentrate on talking to Mark, Mr. Albertson. He wants to find out more about these candidates because Basil's had his perspective. He does a lot of Basil does a lot of blogging. He blogs on the Washington Post. He blogs on a couple little right-wing rags known as, one is Newsmax, which is the better known of the two, and the other one is something called Conservative Byte, and that's B-Y-T-E. And Basil does a lot of blogging there, and he doesn't blog. He's not trying to cause trouble. He's not trying to get into arguments with people, but he just has to step in occasionally and correct people when they say things that are clearly not accurate, that are clearly untruthful. And so Basil, if you for the audience, if you want, you can Google Basil BuddhaCat Washington Post or Basil BuddhaCat Conservative Byte or Basil BuddhaCat Newsmax, and you'll find some of Basil's opinings on the internet. But at any rate, so Basil wants to know from okay, I want to okay. Sometimes it's hard to translate. It's okay. Yep. Okay. He's curious about President Obama because he says that Basil says that he likes President Obama a lot. He's had some points of disagreement with him on some issues. He understands that extending the Patriot Act was something that was pretty much unfightable. He pretty much was done because his veto, if he vetoed it, it would have been overridden. And he noted the signing statement that President Obama attached to that, where he said that although he's signing the Patriot Act to extend it, he and his administration would never follow any of the opportunities that are presented in order to hold people without charging them with crimes. But he wants you to critique President Obama's first 3 years in office. And anything specific, Basil? Any specific points you want him to touch on? No, he says no, just a general critique of President Obama's first 3 years in office.
Well, President Obama is a corporate candidate, like Clinton was, like Bush was, and like many of these Republican candidates are. You don't get to the White House nowadays without being a corporate candidate. End of discussion there.
Okay.
Here's a guy who came out of the Daily School of Politics. The name of socialist that came out of that school. As unlike Glenn Beck, who says Obama is a socialist, a communist, Marxist, so on and so forth. This is a man, as a senator, who was a vehement opponent of the Iraq War. Is not getting us out of Iraq despite having the troops out of there. We are still in Iraq. Witness the 5,000 or 6,000 contractors are in that embassy that we have in Baghdad, which is the largest embassy we have in the world. It's the size of a Vatican.
The Emerald City, as it's called.
Yeah, and it's the largest CIA station outside the United States. This is a man who said he was going to get us involved deeper in Afghanistan. He did that. He kept that campaign promise. This is a man who was a supporter of a single-payer health care insurance. Of course, when he became president, he was not. This is a man who...
Whoa, hold on. Basil's ears are... Okay. I saw a flick of the ear. He's saying that he's very much a believer that President Obama did, in fact, favor single payer, but wasn't able to get that, and being a good compromiser. And now Basil likes to liken President Obama to another president, another skinny senator from Illinois became president named Abraham Lincoln, that in fact did a lot of things during the time that he was in office, suspending habeas corpus during the Civil War. But Basil says that he really believes sincerely, and he wants to have a point of disagreement with you on that President Obama is very much and was very much and will continue to be very much in favor of single payer. But go on.
Well, I think that with regards to that particular issue, single payer, it was said by the White House, that the Obama was a community organizer, which the Republicans, like Glenn Beck, the conservatives, try to poo-poo that as it being a socialist agenda, which it's not. Anybody can be a community organizer. It makes no difference to your political persuasion.
Girl Scouts are conservative community organizers. Boy Scouts, all many things that
that's correct,
that we hold near and dear as Americans. Political activism, political involvement, giving your time up in order to serve on a board of planning and zoning, anything in your community. It's community organizing.
Of course, the real right-wing agenda doesn't want community organizing. They don't want you involved. They want to be able to run the show, so to speak. But the point being is that
Basil just winked. Go ahead.
But the point being is if this president was such a community organizer, which he got a lot of his money in his campaign in 2008, supposedly from individuals giving money, then if he was really a single-payer booster, then why didn't they send that call out to this so-called community organization that they had and get the 11 million, 12 million, 15 million people, and you could have got 1.5 million people out of that organization to descend on Washington, go to the White House, and then go to the Capitol building and put pressure on Congress to say we want single-payer insurance. That was not done. So, in that essence, he's not the populist that they say he is. The insurance companies wrote a lot of that bill, and they were not going to countenance single payer. They are not going to do that. And he acquiesced to that. So, if he was a real populist, he would have fought against that, and he didn't do that. So, I disagree with the fact that this man's a populist. He's a corporate candidate. He's getting more money now than all these Republicans put together. For his reelection for his reelection bid, and like I said, he wouldn't get that money if he was not a corporate candidate. So I don't believe that he's the populist that he's alleged to be.
Basil's thinking Basil's going to have a comeback for you later on at some point. Oh, hold on, we have a call in. Okay, hold on. Basil BuddhaCat Presents. Speak of the devil, it's Glenn Beck. Hello. Now, Glenn, I'm going to have to pass along what you're going to pass along to me to the audience, because we do not have a live on-air feed. So the audience is not going to be able to hear what you have to say, but you can add to the discussion, and certainly if I misspeak on anything that you've said along the way, you can certainly correct me on that. Okay. Glenn wants to know, or should I call you Mr. Beck? He says you can call me an American. Okay. Mr. Beck. Mr. Beck wants to know, he's got a question for Mark Albertson, and he's got a question for Basil. Okay, first, which one first? Okay. He wants to know if, Mark, he wants to know if you're a communist. And there's something tricky about it, what he's saying, and I'm not sure exactly why he's phrasing it quite that way. But he wants me to ask you, are you a communist?
No, I've been vaccinated.
Okay. You got a laugh out of him. Okay, so he's going to take the cover off the ball on this one. He's going to ask the real question that he really meant behind that. Are you a Groucho Marxist?
No, I'm a Harpo Marxist.
Okay, Harpo Marxist. Sorry, or is that the answer you were looking for? Okay, Glenn's going to get serious, and that's not too often that Glenn gets serious, because as he describes himself as being basically a clown of the airwaves, and fair enough. He wants to know, in fact, if you are a communist.
Oh, perish the thought.
Do you hear that? Nope. The answer is negatory on that. Okay, well, now I have a question for you, Mr. Beck. Are you as jovial as they say you are? I mean, is it all just is the show just a complete bit of comedy in motion with your chalkboards and your felt tip markers and your on the air sobbing? Are you sincere about this, or is this something that is your show principally an entertainment show, or do you really have heartfelt discussions with your audience? He hung up. Or we had a bad connection, one or the other. Okay, now Basil's got another question. Oh, this one's for me. Basil, okay. I'm only going to repeat it if it's good. Okay. Basil wants to know when my contract runs out. Basil, you haven't taught Lilith how to translate for you. And besides, if you had her translating for you, who's going to translate for her? Seriously? Okay. Basil says, I can stay on a while longer. Unless you can get that snark hound behind the camera to be able to speak English and translate. Because, unfortunately, the audience, we're in America, Basil, and the audience speaks English. So, granted, a lot of Americans don't speak English very well because they just don't take the time to learn to speak. Okay, Basil tweaked his whiskers a little bit there, and he wants me to mention the fact that I'm not speaking about immigrants. He wants it, and you're right. I'm not speaking about immigrants. I was speaking. Yep, you're right. I was speaking actually about folks that, for instance, mix up their nouns and their adjectives. Okay, you're speaking specifically about people that call it the Democrat Party instead of the Democratic Party. Yeah, that's exactly what he was talking about. Okay. Okay, now Basil, you've got the floor. What else do you want to know? What else do you want to hear? Anything more about any of the other candidates? Okay, he wants to know if you've ever tried that is it Godfather's Pizza that Herman Cain was CEO of? What was the pizza that he was CEO of?
Maybe it was Godfather.
He doesn't know. He just doesn't know. He doesn't know. He's not sure if he's ever had Herman Cain's variety of pizza. So, how about something a little bit more substantive about the candidates? What else do you want to know from Mark? Okay. Yep. He wants to know if you've ever seen Sarah Palin not winking. Oh, you know what? As a matter of fact, we've had Sarah on the show, and as you'll note, sure enough, she's kind of stuck in that perpetual wink, if you will. Okay, and we couldn't get her to open up that other eye. And actually, we had a call in when former Governor Palin was on. It was suspected on the show. We thought for a moment that perhaps her makeup occasionally clogged together, and that's what caused that wink to be frozen in place. But we had a call in from Estee Lauder, and Estee Lauder noted that makeup does not do that, and that we were doing a great disservice to makeup, to the makeup industry, to the cosmetic industry, by even thinking for a moment that could be caused by the misapplication or the over-application of cosmetics. Okay.
Really?
Okay. Because if that were the case, if you look at this picture here, now this is a picture taken of, as you'll note, Ron Paul and some of his supporters, and that was when Ron Paul appeared in New Hampshire just before the primary on a Sunday afternoon at a little town on the north end of Lake Winnipesaukee. And he, if you'll note in the picture, everybody in the picture except for, I think one, has both of their eyes closed. And, in fact, they're all men. So I don't think you can attribute that to cosmetics. I don't think so. So you'll notice that. See how? A lot of closed eyes in that picture.
Yeah,
oh, sorry, Basil. I have to slide it over a little bit further. Basil doesn't want to be blocked from the camera.
Closed eyes, half eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly enough. Okay. 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 Basil says, okay, he's saving his best for last, and he wants to actually take this question into the next show because he's firmly convinced that the Republican candidate, as a lot of people are saying, the real Republican candidate in the long run will be Mitt Romney. Now, however, it's important to note that Basil was playing a little word game with me, and we'll get onto that in the next show. We're going to close off the Friday night show now. We'll come back and we'll do a Sunday show. This has been Basil BuddhaCat Presents. My name is David Stevenson. I'm Basil's co-host. Center slot, Basil BuddhaCat, and our good and dear friend, Mark Albertson. Thanks. Good night. Okay.
They say they'd rob your grandma blind on Wall Street, fritter her away her Medicare on Wall Street. And Pharma Oil and their pet fox don't care if she lives in a box, so long as they wear platinum jocks on Wall Street, Meow.
The camp, they don't want to talk.